Hey everyone, welcome to the Ask Nicole weekly live stream, which I should call the Ask Breaking Even weekly live stream today because we have a special guest, which I'll get to in a second, where we're talking about Sendgrid versus Mailchimp, which are both email service providers. And I'm joined by Jessica Heck. Hey, Jessica.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate you being here because Jessica knows infinitely more about Sendgrid than I do because I was using Mailchimp for years and years, and Jessica's been helping us implement Sendgrid at the company to try to evaluate if it's a good solution for us. And we figured if we were asking the question, you guys were probably wondering too. But before we get started, I also want to say that if you like this sort of thing, we do broadcast every week on wherever you're watching this now is where we broadcast every week, but it also ends up going on our website. So if you want to see past episodes or just see what else we have going on, the YouTube channel has playlists and the website has the archives of the episodes. So check that out. All right. So like I said, today's topic is all about email marketing. So Jessica, before I guess joining our team, like what was your experience, I guess, sending and receiving marketing emails? Had you used MailChimp before?
I never used Mailchimp. Back in the day, I used Constant Contact.
Okay, similar.
Yeah, I had a little bit of experience with it, but not much.
Yeah. Yeah. So and just in case like you're watching this and say like, well, I already am paying for whatever Google Workspace or Microsoft Teams, like why would I buy email marketing software? And the reason is you can't just send people marketing emails whenever you want to. There's laws. Well, specifically, there's a law. So if you want to go look into it, it's called the Can-Spam Act. It was first passed in 1999. I guess it was amended in, I think, 2003. But the idea is that people need to opt in. And if you do have a marketing email, you have to give them a one-click opt-out, as well as provide contact information for your company within the email newsletter template. So that's the kind of the gist of what's important about it. But if you wanted to like look into it, like that's the name of it. We're not just making it up. So you actually do have to use a sending service when you commercially contact people, which is why we've been using Mailchimp. Gosh, I think since it came out, I literally remember sitting in my 220 square foot apartment using Mailchimp. Like, so it's been at least 12 years, 14 years. It's been a while. And Jessica knows that I'm a creature of habit. I have a hard time making changes, especially when I've made a decision. But when Jessica came on, we still use Mailchimp for breaking even at the moment. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to run a little bit of an experiment before we, committed to moving our whole setup, because why would we just move everything without knowing? But the first thing, and just kind of a brief intro, you've probably heard of Mailchimp, you've probably heard of Constant Contact, right? They're typically marketed at small businesses, and they have stuff like in Constant Contact, can you make like a link? You can make like a landing page, right?
You can make a link.
Yeah. Like you can make a landing page, you have the email list. You might be able to they're trying to be your full service sort of marketing automation service, that does a lot of different things. But I would say that where I've heard of Sendgrid was when I started working with larger clients. And so we have one client that sends out 150,000 emails a month in their marketing send. And so Mailchimp isn't really, I shouldn't say it isn't built for that. I'm sure you could send that many emails with it. But what I noticed a lot of people in enterprise level solutions, a couple of them mentioned Sendgrid, and it kind of went into my brain. And so when Jessica joined the team, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to run this experiment. Mm-hmm. And Jessica was like, sure, let's do it, because she's game like that. So, but I will say now, as somebody who's used Constant Contact and Mailchimp a bit, what was it like when you first logged into what's the interface like for people who I guess maybe haven't ever looked into it or maybe heard of it until today?
I have to fully disclose that when I first got on to Sendgrid, I felt like I was learning something it was a bit left brain. Like I just didn't understand it at all. So it took me about 2 months to start feeling confident in what I was doing. And, in the 2 months that was 4 newsletters, right? So I felt pretty confident by the end of month 2, but there was a learning curve for the first couple weeks that I was using it. And I was like, I don't want to, I was used to Mailchimp by that point, and that seemed Mailchimp has a really nice design to it, where
Mm-hmm.
SendGrid is a little bit more business oriented. You know, it's like, okay, you plug, push, go. Um, but once I started to use the program, I like it a lot better.
Yeah, and I will say that too. I mean, and honestly, when you go on their website, like it looks like it was designed by some programmers. You know what I mean? Because it was. And Mailchimp is more drag and drop. Well, although I think SendGrid is kind of drag and drop, right, with the
Yeah,
template.
SendGrid they have design option or HTML. So you can, but what I really like about it is if you are coding, you can have a side-by-side picture. So it'll show you the design as you're coding it, which is really nice to go in and you can kind of pinpoint where you're at a little bit easier.
So yeah, so if you've ever dragged and dropped a headline into Mailchimp and are like, I picked that it's centered, and I picked in the Mailchimp templates, I wanted them all centered. Why is this one left justified? If you had access to code and you knew a little, you would be able to fix that really quickly. But in Mailchimp, it's not really as much like that as you would expect. So I will say, okay, so for our experiment, because I was like, I'm a science major, I like experiments. What we wanted to do is we wanted to experiment. And what's good about Anchor Space is we have two separate lists. We have one for Maine and one for New York. So that gives us the opportunity, like Jessica says, in a 1 month, we're sending 2 emails to because it's a monthly email. Each list gets a different email. And so what we thought we would do is compare the data for 3 months of one versus 3 months of the other and just kind of see what was different. I will say this is not a perfect experiment, okay? We didn't duplicate the exact same template. Like we didn't try to make it look the exact same. We didn't send the same content. Obviously, and you'll see when we compare the stats, we compared May of last year to May of this year. So obviously the list got bigger in that time, right? So we're not even dealing necessarily with the same exact size list. So all this to say is it's not perfect. Okay, this experiment's not perfect, but I think it's enough for us to have an interesting discussion about. So I wanted to know 3 things about SendGrid. The main thing that's always been marketed to me as is that the deliverability is good. So does using SendGrid increase our deliverability as a company? Because obviously, right, if Jessica's going to spend time, formatting an email and we're sending it to people, we want to make sure that it actually arrives in their inbox. It's really important. Does it decrease the bounce rate? Does it filter out bad email messages or alert us when there's something going on, that kind of thing? And finally, I mean, obviously, when someone gets an email, like sometimes it's like they check the subject line and they kind of remember you exist. But also, typically, you actually put content in the email that you maybe want people to click on. And, we were talking before the broadcast, if they were on a website, we could see how much time they spent on the website. We could see if they scrolled. We could see what, where their mouse hovered. But because it's an email and it's sitting in someone's inbox, we can't see how long they looked at it or anything. We can see if they clicked on stuff. So that's like kind of shows if our content is engaging. It's like the one way I think we could measure it. So anyway, we pulled together. Should we look at the stats first?
Yeah,
like of comparing them?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. So we made a chart because why wouldn't we? Jessica made it attractive. So thank you for doing that. So what we wanted to do was compare, like I said, the two. So SendGrid is in red and Mailchimp is in teal. And so we put the months side by side. And the reason we did it this way, because Jessica and I talked about this before we started, is that like Bar Harbor is really seasonal. So May, and actually everywhere is seasonal, but like there is particularly seasonal. So we thought comparing it the same month to the same month would be fair. Now I will say that anyway, there's some variability in the list, but yeah, Jessica, when we were pulling this together, what were some of the thoughts that you were having as you were looking at these numbers?
Well, not to jump. Well, I won't jump right into.
Yeah,
okay,
jump right into it.
Jump right into.
Yeah.
So in June, we had a significant increase of a drop in open rate But a significant bounce rate increase
Right.
for Anchor Space Potsdam.
Well,
So
actually for both of them. Like,
for
so
both, yeah,
if you look at the bounce rates like across, it's like, so that's the third and the fourth lines if you're watching here now. So if you look, they're like 1%, 3%, 9%, okay. And then you have 11 and 14%, which is like a considerable jump, which is in, June of 2022. So, and you had found out there's something up, right? Like there, because that was a
yeah.
jump.
Yeah, and there was actually I had found a couple articles, we can list them in the show notes, but that increases were going up. But I found it interesting. So even though the Bar Harbor bounce rate went up significantly, the open rate was still good on that, which was very interesting. But the Potsdam dropped half almost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it went from a 40, it went from 41 to 27. So yeah, what I really like about SendGrid for that is that the information's really easy to look at to see those graphs.
Yeah, and actually, just for a second, I wanted to just show because I think you had sent me a little because I think it showed like you were looking at something and there was like a little bubble and you were able to click on it and it was showing you what was going on with the spike of bounce rates and where they were actually potentially coming from.
Yeah, SendGrid, they listed out by email providers, and I had also seen this in some articles that I've come across, is that certain email providers have a higher bounce rate or not, or sometimes not even being delivered to certain emails. But this month was Yahoo in June. For some reason, it just spiked.
Yeah, and you can see that that Yahoo spike in purple on the bottom graph here. So that's really, it's funny that you saw an article about Yahoo and we actually see it broken out in this data.
Yeah.
Like, well, but that's good to know, right? And that's why we didn't run this experiment for 1 month, right? Because we needed to establish like a bit of a pattern to see what was and wasn't working. And so, yeah, so that jumped out to me. But the other thing too, and it's funny because you would think that it's 2 co-working spaces and the lists, the Potsdam list is bigger. It's like about what, like 100-ish people bigger. It's not like way bigger, maybe 150. It's not like it's 1,000 people bigger or something. It's just a little bit bigger. But the 2 lists behave differently enough that you notice. Like the Potsdam people, like if you look at the link clicks, which is the bottom 2 rows, like Potsdam is way more likely to click on a link than Bar Harbor. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a SendGrid or a Mailchimp thing. So we have to understand too that, and that's why I wanted to do this with 2 lists too, is because I didn't want to be like, okay, we did this for 1, we can come to conclusions. Now I'm not saying we can even come to conclusions with 2, but at least we can say that, if you have 2 different lists going on and you have 2 different sets of data, apparently that's moderately normal. Apparently, because look at those. Was there anything else that you thought was interesting as we were pulling this graph together for this stream?
Well, I think it's interesting too to see the 2 locations. In our case, we have Potsdam, Northern New York, which has 4 universities right here. And come May time, when the universities and the schools are letting out, everybody leaves. Where you've got Bar Harbor, where everyone's going. So I don't know, are they all leaving? They're going to Bar Harbor? Like they're just, so the population changes the numbers, and I would say, it's interesting to see that the shift.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, you said the Potsdam one was down by half this month, and I'm wondering if that's because a lot of, graduations happened, in mid-May or very early June. And so if I had a university job, maybe I'm not checking my email as much, or maybe I'm like on vacation with an autoresponder and I get back and I'm cleaning through my email and there's like 500 and I think, oh, catch you next month, Anchor Space. But I'll be curious what July will bring. So we might I don't know. So what we did was, by the way, if you want to run this experiment yourself, we paused Mailchimp. So we're actually not being charged for Mailchimp right now. It just kept our data. So it's just sitting there. Um, so, and right now we're paying SendGrid. Um, and actually, just for a second, let's talk a little bit about the differences between pricing of these services. It is similar, but it is not entirely the same. So let's just start with Mailchimp, which is the one I'm more familiar with. So a lot of pricing, and I like that you took this. Jessica pulled together most of these visuals today, so which I totally appreciate. She picked 500 contacts, right? So if you had less contacts, you typically pay them less money, and if you have more contacts, you pay more money. That's super typical. Um, and for just to give you an idea, so the free version lets you do a lot. Like breaking even, we're still on the free version. We have, I think, 550-ish people on the breaking even list, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. It's under 600. I know that, and it's a little bit above 500, but not much. And so that's free. We send a monthly newsletter, and that seems to work. For Anchor Space, because the amount of contacts we had, and also we were sending automated emails. So when someone joins the list, they get an onboarding series. We were paying something like $89 a month or $85 a month. It was something like that, which is what made me say, if we're paying, 80 something dollars a month to send a monthly email, what would a different service look like? On to SendGrid. So the SendGrid one, yeah, I think we're being charged $19.95 a month. And I think Jessica might know a little bit more about these different ones than I do. Is there a reason we didn't qualify quite for the free one, or what was the?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not
Yeah.
sure where we didn't. I think,
Oh, 100. Okay.
yeah, I was going to say, I think it was the number
Yeah.
contacts that we had.
Yeah. So it's the number of sends instead. So like, let's say that, Jessica and I each subscribers, right? We're two people, but let's say we got a series of 3 onboarding emails plus the monthly newsletter. That would actually be 4 emails for each of us, if that makes sense. So even though it's one email address, we're sending sometimes multiple emails to the same email address. So, and those all count. So I think 100 just wasn't going to do it. So as you see, it starts at $20 a month, and you can adjust it based on the size of your list or how many emails that you're sending. But yeah, the difference between $85 and $20 was like, I mean, I personally liked that as a cheap business owner, but I also didn't want to make Jessica use something that was terrible either. So I was like, well, let's just try it for a few months. We won't commit to anything. And then what I've been doing, because all of our sign up forms are signed up to Mailchimp, is I go into the Mailchimp list and I export anyone new that has been added, um, in the last month, and I just put, send them to her, and she puts them into SendGrid. It's not like it's a big number to do that once a month at the moment, but if we do switch over, we'll switch everything over. And SendGrid does seem to integrate with a lot of stuff. It integrates with our forms that we use, which is Gravity Forms, which is a WordPress plugin. But it seems like they integrate with a lot of other stuff. And I think, have you poked around the integrations much? Or I know you've like looked around way more back here than I have.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not overly familiar with them, but
And it's fine.
the design aspect of it is
Yeah.
so much easier to now that I'm acquainted with it. It's so much easier. But I really like the interface with that. But we also found out that they do marketing campaigns. So Nicole had asked me to look into drip campaigns because I know Mailchimp does, a series of campaigns that you can do. So if you've got somebody who's new to your business or a new client or whatever, you can set up a series of like 1 to 3 different emails that will automatically go out. So they both have the capability. To my knowledge, it looks like SendGrids is even really easy to set up for that series.
And I think that you can make conditional triggers. I was seeing that like let's say I open the first email but not the last 2. Maybe you'd want to send me a 4th one, if based on that behavior. I did see something like that about it.
Yeah.
So like it, with the Mailchimp one, it was like, okay, you can send 3. And I know that Mailchimp is working on things like they want to be like automated and, send people campaigns based on their behavior. So if they're like looking at some product in your Mailchimp store, that you would get some marketing message specific because you were looking at that product. Like I know that they're trying to do a little bit more with that too, but it seems like SendGrid is never going to want to be your complete marketing service. It's like, we do email, we do text messages, they will get delivered.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. They're like your friendly neighborhood tech guy who's, they're not going to they're not going to bring the potluck dish to the company party, but they will fix your computer and be nice about it when needed. They do their job and they do it well. And they're just not going to add anything extra. And to me, that's fine, because that's what I'm in it for. As a marketing company, we're in it for, we want to be able to send emails that are going to get delivered in an affordable way on behalf of us and our clients. I will say a quick thing here, though, if you've got to this far. We did have a little snafu, is too strong a word. I just remembered this as we were talking. I just added this into the broadcast. So I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, you have to have a one-click unsubscribe, right? You have to make it easy for people. You can't be like, oh, you have to call us, and then you have to send us a certified letter, and then you have to wait 3 days for a dove to appear on your doorstep. Yeah, it has to be easy. So that's what the idea of the one click is it's supposed to be like an easy unsubscribe. And so we were trying to figure out how, because I was like, well, what people want to, so you do, okay, can you talk about this? Because I figured it out, but I remember it was like, where does the unsubscribe link go?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was expecting it to just show up magically in the template, but you have to create this. Yeah, tell us more about this, because
you have to press it to be active on your template. So, and we, when I went into SendGrid, I was looking at like unsubscribe, so you can make groups, which is really nice since we have 2 different email groups that we're sending out to different contacts. You can set an unsubscribe per group. So it'll organize it for you. And then when it sends it to them, it gives us that information. But there was at one point you have to I thought that it would be something that was automatic, but you have to go in and you have to enable it to be, and then it populates at the bottom, at the bottom of the email for you.
So when you do your test send, if there's nothing on the bottom, that's an unsubscribe when you get it. Just know that you have to go find the settings and enable it. Yeah. And I know that you've had to troubleshoot some stuff. How's the documentation with SendGrid? How is it to figure out what's going on?
It's kind of hard to find information.
Okay.
I sent out a couple contact emails. This has been a popular thing too that I found. The customer service, my personal experience has not been the best. But I don't have anything to compare it to because I haven't contacted other people's customer service about stuff like this. But I did, it's kind of like the unsubscribe. I also, Nicole was like, well, we, had mentioned that trying to get the address on the bottom of the email so that it's listed too. So I couldn't just go in and press because we have 2 different lists. So it was a little bit limiting. I didn't want to put Anchor space Bar Harbor on Anchor space Potsdam, and it only allows you to list it one time. So that's when you go in, and when you're doing your preview of your newsletter before you send it out, you've got to code it. Well, that's the only way I figured out is I have to go into the coding portion and then fill it in specifically for each single send use. So it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm not a coder by any means, but it's been a learning curve. And, but when you go into coding in the HTML, it's really easy for that, which says a lot.
Yeah. And, and back to our, like, sort of, if we were asking this original question of like, what's better? And the other thing too, and I'm realizing that I made it, I was like, let's add deliverability in there, Jessica. And then I made it tiny. So all the email deliverability is written, you know what? I'm going to make it full screen. Let's try that. There we go. I can see it a little bit better now. If we compare them, the first one is, 96%, I think, and the other one's 93 to 97%. And because that's the thing with SendGrid, it actually pulls together your data from everything. It's like, here is all the email addresses you have, not based on groups or whatever, but you can also get data more granularly too, but it also tends to aggregate it. So that's why there's a bit of a range for the Mailchimp one, is because it's so funny. Like the Potsdam one, the deliverability was like 93 or 92% at times, versus the 97% of Bar Harbor. And then in June, it went up to 98%. And then as you see with the SendGrid, it's 96, 97, 98%. So it's pretty solid there. But yeah, so I guess if we look at the graph and we look at our stuff, and tell me if you agree with this, that, that the deliverability and bounce rate and do seem better in SendGrid, like a little bit, like
it
1 to 2%.
A little bit. Yeah, because then you can, I really like the functionality of being able to see which emails, providers, and kind of comparing it to what I find on the forums. It's definitely noticeable.
Right. And then with Mailchimp, it'll tell you the individual email addresses that bounce, but it's not going to show you patterns like that. And then if you see some data, like, so the June weirdness, the bounce rate, it had like a little red exclamation mark, and Jessica could kind of click on it and get some more information. So I think that SendGrid is trying to sort of use the big data to give us information about, like, hey, we noticed that this is, lower than usual or higher than, it's trying to like sort of use that intelligent data to inform us of patterns that it sees in our data. And Mailchimp, you have to go through your individual campaigns and see that. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, we ran this report and, it looks like May is the best month for you to send news. I don't know. I've never seen anything like that in Mailchimp. But it's a bit of an interface question. And, is the difference between 1% and 2% a big deal? If you have 100 people, like, maybe not. If you have 100,000 people, I would say a little bit more so, which is probably why those types of companies do really care about things like deliverability and stuff like that, because even if 1% of people don't get the email, that's a lot of people. And I thought that was like super interesting to like see the differences between the services. Like I said, it's not that one is like better than the other. They just work differently. And for our particular use case, which is a co-working space newsletter that has an onboarding series, it seems like SendGrid is going to work well for us. I think we're going to, I'm not going to say it on, we'll talk about it off air, but we might continue it for another couple of months before saying an official goodbye to Mailchimp. But yeah, there's a lot of really great stats, back here with the, this is, so I just wanted to show some examples of kind of how SendGrid reports stuff versus Mailchimp. And this, I feel like this interface also kind of informs how, like, it looks nice, right? But it's not, it still looks like, I don't know, an Excel graph from 1995 a little bit. It's not, it doesn't have, so this is like the email providers. And then let's look at, this is the Mailchimp stats, right? This much, it's more designed, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to pull them into a CSV file, which it does have this export function, SendGrid, that you can pull into a spreadsheet and do your own calculations. And it does have, some data, and there's that little red exclamation mark next to the bounce rate saying, hey, this bounce rate is higher than usual. And the green saying, oh, yeah, this is in line with what we're expecting, versus Mailchimp. This is your bounce data. And you can't export it as a CSV. By the way, I did cut off. It had a list of all the email addresses that bounced below it. I figured I wouldn't out anyone. And when we were looking, but, they both provide lists of your bounced emails. We saw some from Russia in there. And I noticed a couple of people I know who have recently left their jobs. Their email from their old job is bouncing. So what you can do as a business owner is just kind of clean those up. It'll keep trying to send them and keep saying, oh, hey, so-and-so doesn't work at this bank anymore. bounce. Surprised they're not getting their email forwarded somewhere else, but that's on them. But we will include maybe within the notes on the website when we post the show notes, we'll include this graph so you can see it in a little bit more detail. But in general, it does seem like SendGrid works a little bit better, not infinitely better, but a little bit better. And if Jessica likes working in the interface better, and it is a quarter of the price, I don't know, seems like a good decision for us. But I'm not going to say it's a good decision for every single person. Mm-hmm. If you want more of a marketing suite, where you can kind of have everything under one roof, if you are a smaller business owner, if you want maybe some e-commerce functionality, maybe Mailchimp would be better for you. So this is not a definitive, go with this particular service. So I called it a Smackdown because I just wanted to like compare them as much as we could compare them, because they are two different services. They're two completely different services. And has sending these emails, Jessica, changed the way that you look at marketing emails that you get?
Yeah, it does actually. So when I'm a little bit more conscious to interact with them, because, now I know, okay, someone's putting, there's a bit of time putting in, for content and, putting relevant information in there and trying to connect with your audience, and really understanding that, newsletters wonderful for engagement, and giving, connecting with your audience, but allowing it to be on their time and space for it. And it's also made me conscious of, for the newsletters that I do have in my email, because we've all got them, that I don't do anything with, I just unsubscribe, just, because that's not doing anything for them either, right? Mm-hmm. As a business, if I'm not opening the email, that's not, not that it's a waste of their time because they're doing it anyways, but it just kind of makes me a little bit more interactive with what I'm getting personally too.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I've been doing kind of the same thing. I spent last weekend cleaning a bunch of email off I think I deleted almost 0.7 gigs of email. And I ended up unsubscribing from a lot of stuff as part of that. Because me too, I was like, okay, why am I getting this? Oh, I'm getting this because someone guilted me into signing up for this email 8 years ago or something. And, I don't live here anymore, and I'm not gonna, I felt bad. I unsubscribed from the, the YMCA of the town I used to live in. But it's it's not that I'm not supporting. It's not like I'm actively against them as an organization. I just literally can't go in there, because I'm not physically there. So I think businesses understand when you do that, and it makes their open rates look better. It makes their bounce rates look better. Well, no, not their bounce rates because you got it, but at least their open rates and stuff. But yeah, and for us, like I said, if you look at the link clicks in that graph, it's not like hundreds of people are clicking on the links. The click-through rate is usually relatively small in the emails. But what a lot of it is, and what I notice when we send our Breaking Even newsletter in particular, because I'm more on that one, is when people reply, they're like, I've been meaning to contact you. It just kind of keeps you top of mind as a business. And, so plan your email content accordingly. You don't need to spend 10 hours writing a beautifully crafted article that is only going to your email list if you only have 50 people on it. You can share some pictures, aggregate some information together, and call it good. So anything else you want to say about this experiment before we close out the broadcast, Jessica?
No, I think if you do end up venturing into SendGrid, give it a few weeks. I'm so glad that Nicole wanted this done and had a time frame for it, because if I was doing it on my own, I'd be like, I'm not doing it, but I'm really glad that, I gave it, a go with it and learned it. And it pushed me out of my comfort zone, especially with the coding and stuff like that. But I actually really like now that I know a little bit more about that. So I would recommend it.
Right. And if you need some help, we're here. Feel free to contact us, Jessica can sit down with you and kind of give you a tour, let you go loose on it, and then a week or so later come back, answer your questions, or like help you figure out anything that you ran into. We've done stuff like that for people before with certainly with Mailchimp, but I don't see why we couldn't also do it with SendGrid. And yeah, and if you've made a tech decision that you made years ago and have been sticking with it, maybe look around and see what else there is. Maybe there's something better out there. And I'm glad Jessica was game to do it, because it had been on my list for a while to like look into this thing that will save me, $50 a month for a while. But, like most business owners, went down on my list. So once I had help, I was able to do it. So maybe you need a little help too, and that's okay. But yeah, but Mailchimp is not the only game in town. There's other great services out there, and having an email list pretty much for any kind of business is a great way to stay in touch with your customers. So consider having one. All right. Have a great week, everybody, and see you next time.
Bye.